Hey everybody, it's Carm here, coming to you on a Thursday afternoon with, finally, Fuzzy, producer. Director's down here taking a nap, a little unaware of the scheduling, but it's fine, go with it. Hope we're all doing as well as can be. Doing pretty good here, just as ever doing a lot of revisiting and kind of going through things. Before I show what I mainly want to show, do a quick addendum to the box set video. Tangerine Dream, Journey Through a Burning Brain. The day after, it was on Tuesday, I was just looking in my car for something in the back seat and found this under one of my sweaters back there. So, yep, little by little I'll get through the whole collection. These are culled from the basically the years bookending the Virgin years, albums from the early 70s and mid 80s. Just kind of going back and forth throughout those periods. Found this last year at the local library for $1 in the lobby. They had one of those kind of rolling racks. They had books, DVDs, CDs, all kinds of things. Everything between 50 cents and $1.50, so not too bad. So yeah, three discs here, all in very good good condition, certainly for the price. So, all things I've had in the collection for a long time, but always nice if you want to kind of go back and forth and kind of an interesting sequence. The albums throughout that era. Like a nice poster. So yeah, just want to share that real quick, and again, little by little I'll get to the rest. Well, starting in right here. Blocking the producer here. Trypticon, Jan Gabarek, Harold Anderson, Edward Vasella, from 1973. A very early ECM. I've had this on CD for many years. This particular copy I found at Goodwill also last year, probably around the same time as that box set for $1. I think it's the first time I ever found an ECM on vinyl in the thrift, and this was really the only damage to it. Add a little tape to it. Not quite as good as new, but good enough. But really nice early trio with these three respective artists. They recorded in November of 1972. Really nice example of Jan Gabarek in particular, kind of going from, he always had a very a signature sound, very distinctive sound. I think this might have been the last album that I'm aware of that he really kind of displayed those influences to any degree. It seemed afterwards he really sounded like nobody but himself. You could hear some, at least I could hear some Ornette Coleman at times, Albert Ayler. And of course, Harold Anderson, who's to me he's still one of the most unheralded bassists around, not just with the Norwegian scene or jazz, but just music in general. Incredible sound. Even at that time, as a very young player, very just amazing chops. And Edward Vasella, the late Edward Vasella, he passed about 20 years ago. Percussionist, composer, someone who had a very original sound, approach to rhythm, being able to imply the rhythm without really overtly stating it, finding the balance between delicacy and intensity. It really shows it on this album. The whole group does. Starting off, the piece Rim, kind of a slow, it was kind of like a dirge-like piece in a way. Again, very free, but also very, very delicate and very subtle, kind of chamber-like, but you can kind of, it almost feels like they're waiting to break out of something, like they're kind of, sort of hemmed in and they're ready to almost explode at any time, but it still remains, it's kind of quiet tension. Selji is really interesting with Jan's flute, which he played a lot more of in the early days, like various wood flutes. Eventually he just pretty much stuck to soprano and tenor sax, but that is a really kind of more of an ethnic feel, just little influences from around the world, other than where they're from. JAV, I think, is where you get more of that ornette sound, or that approach to is playing some of the phrasing. Sort of sounds like it's coming through on that piece. And then you hear a little more intensity from the group as a whole, the way they're interacting, and again, ramping up the intensity but still keeping it pretty restrained. Sang is a very beautiful piece. I think it's the only one where Jan is playing bass saxophone, but very, very subtle, very slow. Not really making full range of the instrument, but just kind of more as an atmosphere. Now the title cut is where they really kind of cut loose, and I kind of hear the Albert Ayler influence. I'd say more on the trio as a whole. If you know, I'm sure a lot of you know Spiritual Unity, Albert Ayler trio, I think from 1964. It's very close to what they were doing there, where they just kind of really go for it. And again, Harold Anderson, his bass playing on there is just, the chopped, some of the stuff he does, the phrases, and the quick bursts of energy just, are really something. At Too High, just a duet between Jan and Edward. That piece is, very, you're kind of being cut loose from the shackles, so to speak, and just kind of going for it. Especially Jan really playing with this kind of abandon. And then the final piece, which I cannot pronounce, is a traditional folk song, native folk song of Norway. Starts off with almost kind of a nursery rhyme simplicity, and then they very gradually deconstruct it, almost sounding like kind of a drunken approach to the melody, just kind of slowly kind of allowing it to fall apart, but still being able to control it and direct it. And a lot of subtle humor at various points in the album, but that piece it really shows. But excellent early ECM. I don't know how much this is held high amongst people as far as Jan Gabarik's output, or I don't know if it's one that's more overlooked or not, but it's if you like, again, that kind of balance between free jazz and kind of a more disciplined approach with chamber music. If you want to find somewhere in between there, so where kind of like a third style and approach emerges. This is really a good album to get into. And whenever the thrifts open up again, check through those bins. You might find this or something comparable. So yeah, a Trypticon from the Jan Gabarik, Harold Anderson, Edward Vasella trio. It's a real nice early ECM. And I haven't really listened to a whole lot of ECM lately, which is unusual for me. So getting me a little back into the catalog. And next up here, switching gears ever so slightly, Lee Ritenour, On the Line, from 1983, and was it Electra Musician. This is my personal favorite album. After the more I'm listening to it lately, I'm enjoying it more and more. During this time, he was doing a lot of, did several albums, which very vocal, very heavy with vocals, kind of a, I don't know if you'd call it like an adult contemporary pop kind of thing. Although he was getting more, stripping it down and just getting to the basics of just playing, more, not exactly straight ahead jazz, but just, a little less pop and a little more substantive. And you can see the lineup on there. Wonderful musicians. And you've got Dave and Don Grusin on keyboards, Anthony Jackson, Nathan East on bass, Harvey Mason on drums throughout. Just wonderful players. And it was recorded direct to disc, or direct to half-inch analog, this particular version, originally for JVC in Japan. But throughout, I mean, it's really, really nice playing. On this one, it's more of a lighter, kind of a lighter fusion, instrumental pop in a way. But again, you've got that, the balance with, with more improvisation. The writ variations, it's more of kind of like it's kind of a Baroque beginning and feel throughout, but again, very, a lot more jazzy. Starbright is more of a nice ballad. Pedestrian, gets a little more up tempo, and you could hear more, kind of more in the way of a little more in the way of soloing. Dolphin Dreams is really a beautiful piece. Kind of the way the changes in the piece are really nice. Kind of like almost like a suite. There's even a portion in there that kind of reminds me of what Carla Bley's group was doing during that time, about the mid '80s, when she was working with smaller groups. Just certain points, it kind of reminds me of what she was doing. That would have been kind of an interesting collaboration. I'd say my personal favorite piece is California Roll. A little biased towards that too, because I have one of my few surviving mixtapes from way back when had that piece on there, and it was about 25 years before I was able to identify it. So then that eventually led me around to this album. So and it really does, you do kind of think of being on the surf, being on the beaches, and just kind of has that feel to it, very easygoing feel. Heavenly Bodies is really a nice ballad. And Ernie Watts is on here too on sax, and if his playing, very melodic and lyrical. Nobody sounds quite like him. I mean, very much a distinctive voice. And On the Line, very up tempo, and quite a bit with the digital drums, which it depends. As long as it's not overdone, you can enjoy it more. But it depends how it's used. But it's a lot of fun on that piece. And Tush is Harvey Mason and Mike Lang. Kind of ends it up on a softer note, more of a ballad. And of course, Lee's guitar playing, going between kind of a more traditional guitar, jazz guitar approach, and various rock styles. He can really play any kind of music, and he just displays a lot of approaches on here, mainly on electric. But if you normally tend to shy away from the lighter jazz, where fusion got lighter and kind of maybe a little too commercial, this one might be worth taking a listen to. If nothing else, if it isn't quite your taste, just to listen for the musicianship. Something about it that could draw you in. So yeah, Lee Ritenour, On the Line, from 1983. I don't think I showed the label on the other one. I'll show that real quick. Yeah, it's been several versions of this out. GRP reissued it, I think not long after this. Before I forget, I'll show the label here of the ECM. Yeah, I love that the early logo of the label early on. Oh, finally here. Let's see if I could, how well or how not well I could pronounce this. Pascal Langerand? De Harmonia Universalia. This is from 1980 on the Minos label. I believe he's a French-Canadian multi-instrumentalist. Various keyboard synthesizers, guitars, some percussion, and voice. Not quite sure how I found out about him. but I might have been in a VC. But also one of the pieces on here, which I'll get to, was featured on, I think, the very first episode of Musical Starstreams back in '81, even before it had that name. It was going under a different name at the time. I always like these studio shots. And you can see the various instrumentation here. If you're an analog synth lover, of course, make anyone, draw anyone in. But really beautiful, cosmic space music. Really very transportive. You really feel like he's taking you kind of upwards into the heavens. Very spacey, progressive, but also propulsive. There's a lot of nice rhythm to this, and his vocal sings in a very high, I don't know, maybe in the alto range, where it almost sounds like female vocals. As far as I can tell, he's the only one on here. He played everything. Yeah, the first piece, Inner Distan, has his vocals and singing almost kind of a wispy, kind of angelic, quality to it. Very, very serene. Just kind of lifts you up with them. The next piece, Abali, almost kind of reminds me of, Vangelis's Albedo 0.39. Kind of reminds me of that piece, except without the voiceover, if you know that. But I guess in a sense it's similarly themed. In Atlantis, it brings back the vocals. He also plays bass guitar on here, electric bass, and throughout has kind of like this nice, subtle rhythmic bed, but also some sequencer that kind of gently propels the piece along. But the way his bass is played, it just has a nice rhythmic bed, not too obtrusive, but it's all balanced really nicely. Again, the whole album it's quite spacey, but there's enough that kind of brings it down to earth too. And there's some acoustic guitar on that piece too, Atlantis. Now the piece O Nos Omnis, that's the one from early Musical Starstreams, which is very cinematic. You could definitely get a sense of kind of departing for the stars, going through the Stargate, at full speed. But it just has a certain drama to it. Like, you're discovering a new area, a new land, new space. And Nova, very kind of droning and atmospheric. You're right in the center of the star clusters. But really beautiful album, really nice piece. And I know when I ran across this, picking out some things to listen to, I thought of Automatic Man, if you know that. I forget the name of the artist, but it kind of reminded me with the cover. It's kind of similar in a way. But, very much recommend if you like some nice progressive space music of that time. 1980 on Minos. Yeah, really lovely stuff. So these are the three for the week. But definitely all very much worth checking out. It was just playing in the background. Again, I can never quite tell if it's coming out on. If you could hear what's in the background, but some people could hear it. David Parsons, in retrospect, selected pieces, 1980, 2003. Another artist I've been into for many, many years. I believe this is Manos Soovar, final piece on the first disc. I think that's from Yatra, it's a 1990 album. It's a New Zealand multi-instrumentalist who I think is still around today, composing and playing and recording. So, an artist worth checking out. Well, we'll do it for this time. From the furry crew here. Again, hope you're all doing as well as possible, and just take it a day at a time together as much as possible. So, until the next one, peace, love, and joy.